The snow had been falling since midnight, and by the time Owen Hartley reached the train station, the platforms were running 40 minutes behind, and nobody was apologizing for it. He hadn't planned to be at Union Station on a Tuesday morning in February. He had a meeting at 9, a call at 11, and a lunch he'd already rescheduled twice with a supplier out of Mississauga. His calendar was the kind that other people in his office looked at and quietly felt sorry for. But his car wouldn't start. The battery had finally given up after 3 Canadian winters of half-hearted maintenance, and the cab he'd called had texted to say it was stuck on the Gardiner, and so here he was, standing in the main hall of Union Station with a paper coffee cup going cold in his hand, watching the departures board flicker and resort itself like it was trying to decide whether to be honest. Owen was 61 years old. He had the kind of face that people trusted without knowing why. Not handsome exactly, but steady. He wore a coat that had been good quality once, dark wool, now slightly worn at the cuffs. His shoes were sensible and unremarkable. He carried a briefcase that was at least a decade old, the leather softened to the color of dark tea. Nothing about him announced anything. That was, in certain rooms, something of a joke. The people who worked for him had long since stopped being surprised by it. He found a seat near the Via Rail waiting area and sat down. Around him, the station moved in that particular morning rush way. Purposeful, slightly anxious, no one quite making eye contact. A family with a stroller was negotiating a path through foot traffic. 2 students shared earbuds from the same phone. A man in a suit was speaking into his own reflection in a darkened window, running lines for some call he had to make. Owen drank his coffee and watched the board. That was when he noticed her. She was sitting on the floor, not on a bench, not leaning against a pillar, but on the actual stone floor, with her back against the wall near the service corridor that staff used to move luggage. She had her knees pulled up and her arms wrapped around them, and she was looking at something on the floor between her feet, though there was nothing there. She was young, mid-20s maybe. Dark coat too thin for the weather, a bag beside her that looked like it had been packed in a hurry, a zipper partly open, the corner of something fabric visible, maybe a sweater, maybe a child's blanket. Owen couldn't tell. He looked away. He looked back. He told himself this was not his situation, but there was something in the way she was sitting. Not defeated, not performing distress for sympathy, just very, very still, in the way a person gets when they've run out of options and have moved past panic into something quieter and more frightening. Owen finished his coffee. He set the cup down. He got up. He didn't plan to. He was 61, not 25, and he had learned a long time ago that most situations were not improved by a stranger inserting himself. But his body had already decided, and so he walked over slowly, and he stopped a few feet away, and he said quietly, "Are you all right?" She looked up. She had dark eyes, the kind that registered everything. She looked at him the way a person does when they've been looked at the wrong way too many times. Assessing, careful, not quite trusting. "I'm fine," she said. Her voice was even, Canadian flatness to it, the vowels of someone from somewhere west of here, maybe, though she'd been in a city long enough to soften it. Owen nodded. "Okay," he said, and he meant to leave it there. He genuinely meant to. He's instead, "Can I get you something? Coffee or—" "I don't need anything," she said. Then, a beat later, "Thank you." Owen stood there a moment. He was aware that he was an older man hovering near a young woman sitting alone, and that this might read several different ways. He was about to go when she spoke again. Actually, she stopped. She looked back at the floor. Then she looked at him again. "Do you have a car?" He blinked. "I do. It's at home, though. It wouldn't start this morning." She closed her eyes briefly. Not dramatically, just the tiny movement of someone absorbing information they didn't want. "I need to get to Oakville," she said. "There's someone there, my son." She said the word carefully, like it was something that could break. "He's with my neighbor. She called me last night and said he's running a fever and I've been trying since 5 this morning to get there, and the trains are delayed, and I can't. I don't have." She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "I'm sorry. You don't know me. I'm sorry." Owen was quiet for a moment. He was thinking. He was also aware that he was thinking more carefully than the situation visibly required, and that this was in its own way telling him something. "What's your name?" he said. She looked up. "Serena," she said. "Serena Bowell Owen Hartley," he said. He didn't offer his hand because she was still on the floor and it would have been awkward. "How old is your son?" 3, she said. His name is Callum. Owen thought about what he had in his pocket. He thought about the meeting at 9, the call at 11, the lunch with the supplier from Mississauga. He thought about the fact that his car was dead in his driveway, and there was a car rental place 2 blocks from his house, which he knew because he'd noticed it every morning for 4 years while walking to the coffee shop. "There's an Enterprise on Front Street," he said. "I'll rent you a car." Serena stared at him. "It'll take 20 minutes, he said. "I'll walk with you." She stopped. "You don't know me. I know you have a 3-year-old with a fever in Oakville," Owen said. "That's enough for now." She stood up slowly, like her legs had been still too long. She was taller than he'd expected. She picked up her bag and held it with both hands, and she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite name. Something between suspicion and a kind of desperate, exhausted hope. "Why would you do that?" she said. Owen thought about it honestly. "I have a daughter," he said. "She's 28. If she were sitting on a floor in a train station trying to get to her child, I'd want someone to help her." Serena held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once and said, "Okay." They walked out of Union Station together into the cold. The snow had eased to something more like mist, the kind that didn't quite fall, just hovered. Owen kept pace with her. She walked fast, someone used to getting places under her own power, and they didn't talk much. He asked once if she knew where the rental place was. She shook her head. He led the way. The Enterprise was warm and fluorescently lit in the way of all places that exist to perform a transaction. A young man behind the counter looked up when they came in. Owen gave his name and his card and rented the smallest available car, a compact silver practical, without explaining who Serena was or why he was doing it. The young man behind the counter looked at them once, glanced away, asked the standard questions. Owen signed where indicated. While they waited for the key to be processed, Serena said quietly, "I'll bring it back tonight, or I can arrange for someone to return it if you need it before then." "Tonight is fine," Owen said. "Don't rush. Your son's matters more than the paperwork." She was quiet for a moment. "I can pay you back. Not all at once, but don't worry about it," he said. "I want to worry about it," she said. There was a firmness in it, something that clarified something for Owen about who this woman was. "I don't want it to be a favor I can't return." "Then buy me a coffee someday," Owen said. "If our paths cross again." Serena looked at him. Something shifted in her face, not quite a smile, but close. The young man slid the key across the counter. Owen walked her to the car in the small lot behind the building. It was the silver compact beaded with moisture, practical in the way that only rental cars are. He handed her the key fob. Their hands didn't touch. "Straight down the QEW," he said. 40 minutes. "Maybe a bit more in this weather, I know the way," she said. "Then, thank you. I mean it." He nodded. He stepped back. She got in, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot without looking back. He stood on the sidewalk and watched the car disappear into the gray of the morning, and then he turned and started walking back toward the station. The meeting was still happening. The call was still at 11. He pulled out his phone and sent his assistant a message about the car rental receipt. It would need to go somewhere, and then he put the phone in his pocket and didn't look at it for the rest of the walk. What surprised him, more than anything, was how calm he felt. Owen Hartley had spent 40 years in business. He'd started with nothing, a one-room office above a hardware store in Hamilton, a second-hand desk, a phone that he'd carried from his parents' house because he couldn't afford a second line. He'd made decisions every day for 4 decades, some of them large and some of them very small, and almost none of them the way they looked from the outside. People assumed the large decisions were the ones that mattered. He'd come to believe otherwise. He got back to Union Station. His train was listed as 15 minutes out, which meant it would be 25. He found a bench and sat down and thought about his daughter, Emily. She lived in Vancouver now. She'd called him Sunday evening to talk about nothing in particular. Her cat, a show she was watching, the weather. And he'd been half distracted by an email he was trying to compose in his head, and now he wished he'd just set the phone on the table and listened properly. He thought about Serena Bowell on the floor of the station, with her arms around her knees, looking at a point somewhere between herself and the wall. He thought about her saying, "I know the way," with that particular certainty, like she'd driven that road in worse conditions and worse states than this one. He thought about the bag she'd been carrying, the open zipper, the corner of what might have been a child's blanket. He didn't know her story, and he hadn't asked because the story wasn't the point. The point was a 3-year-old named Callum with a fever, and a mother who had been sitting on a stone floor since 5 in the morning because she had run out of every other option, and a Tuesday in February that had gone wrong for everyone. His train came. He got on. He found a window seat and watched Toronto scroll past and then dissolve into the quieter geographies of the suburbs. His phone buzzed several times. He answered the important ones and let the others wait. The meeting was fine. The meeting was always fine. By noon, he was back in his office, a room that most first-time visitors found disorienting in its understatement, given whose it was. He had lunch at his desk. He thought about Serena less and less as the afternoon filled with the ordinary business of managing things. It was just after 5 when his phone rang from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He answered, "Mr. Hartley." Her voice, steadier than it had been that morning, but something in it still very careful. "It's Serena Bowell. I wanted to let you know the car is back. I left it at the Enterprise. I spoke to the same young man and he has the key." "Good," Owen said. "How's Callum?" There was a pause. "He's okay. His temperature came down. He's asleep right now." Another pause, shorter. "He asked me to stay. So I'm going to stay tonight if that's completely fine," Owen said. "I'm glad he's better." Silence for a moment, the particular kind that isn't uncomfortable. "I don't know how to." She stopped. Started again. "I've been thinking about what to say since I got here and I still don't have it. I was sitting in that station and I had genuinely used up everything I had and I didn't know what I was going to do, and then you." She stopped again. "You just walked over and asked if I was all right. Like it was a normal thing to do." "It is a normal thing to do," Owen said. "It doesn't feel like it anymore," she said quietly. "It hasn't for a while." Owen looked at his desk, at the papers on it, at the window beyond his desk where the city was doing its evening thing, dark coming on fast the way it did in February, the lights coming up. "I hope that changes for you," he said, and he meant it simply without weight. "Me too," Serena said. "Thank you, Mr. Hartley." "Owen," he said. "Owen," she said. "Thank you." She hung up. He set the phone on the desk and sat for a moment in his office that no one would ever describe as impressive, and he felt something he recognized but hadn't felt in some time. It wasn't satisfaction. Satisfaction was about outcomes, and this barely counted as an outcome. It was something simpler, something closer to the way he'd felt when Emily was very small and had been sick with something ordinary, a cold, an ear infection, and had finally fallen asleep against his shoulder. And he'd stood in the dim hallway of their old house in Hamilton and thought, "This is what I'm here for. This specific thing." He drove home that evening in a cab. His own car was still dead in the driveway. He'd need to deal with that tomorrow. He made dinner, something simple. He called Emily, and this time he put his phone on the table and listened. She asked him if anything interesting had happened. He said no, not really. He said the trains had been delayed. "Classic," she said. "February is the worst. February has its moments," he said. The next morning was clear and cold, the kind of bright that February sometimes produced after a gray stretch like an apology. Owen's car started on the second try. The temperature had come up enough. He drove to his office the long way, which added 12 minutes and took him past a school where children were being dropped off, small figures in puffy coats disappearing through a set of doors. He thought about Callum, whom he had never seen. 3 years old. Fever gone, probably awake by now, probably asking for breakfast, probably entirely unaware of the particular geography of the previous day. Owen had lived long enough to know that most of what mattered was invisible in the moment. You made a choice, and the choice rippled outward in directions you'd never track, and most of those directions you'd never know about. That was all right. That was, in a way, the whole point. You didn't do things because you'd find out how they turned out. You did things because they were the right shape for the moment, and the moment was what you had. He parked in the underground garage and took the elevator up. His assistant, a composed young man named Fletcher who had worked for him for 3 years and still occasionally forgot to look unsurprised, handed him his messages and said, "You have a package, sir. Courier this morning." It was on the corner of his desk when he got there. A small box, padded envelope really, nothing dramatic. He opened it. Inside was a coffee gift card, a good one, loaded, the kind that would take a while to work through, and a handwritten note on plain white paper. "For the coffee you said I could buy you someday. I couldn't wait to see if our paths crossed again. Thank you for being the kind of person who still asks if someone is all right. Serena P.S. Callum is fully recovered and has very strong opinions about dinosaurs. I thought you should know. Owen read it twice. He set it on his desk. He looked at it for a moment the way a person looks at something they want to remember properly. Fletcher appeared in the doorway. Your 9 o'clock is here. Give me 2 minutes, Owen said. Fletcher disappeared. Owen picked up the note one more time, folded it once along the existing crease, and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket against his chest. Then he straightened his collar, picked up his pen, and went to meet his 9 o'clock. Some days in a person's life leave a mark and some days don't, and there's rarely a way to know in advance which will be which. This one had looked, from the outside, like nothing. A dead battery, a delayed train, a gray Tuesday in February. But the man who walked into that meeting room was, in some small and unannounced way, not quite the same man who had stood in Union Station the morning before. He didn't mention it to anyone. He didn't need to. Some things are like that. They don't require an audience to be real.